Welcome to today's episode of the most mind-blowing survival story in human history. Picture this. For nearly 2 million years, longer than any human species has ever existed, a remarkable group of early humans dominated the planet. They were the first to walk like us, the first to leave Africa, the first to harness fire, and the first to create tools so advanced they used the same design for over 1 million years. Meet Homo erectus, the ultimate human survivors who conquered 3 continents, survived countless ice ages, and outlasted every other early human species by an incredible margin. While our own species, Homo sapiens, has existed for a mere 300,000 years, these incredible ancestors thrived for 2 million years across Africa, Asia, and Europe. But here's what makes their story absolutely mind-boggling. After surviving longer than any human species before or since, after conquering the world with nothing but stone tools and fire, after adapting to every climate and ecosystem from tropical jungles to frozen steppes, Homo erectus suddenly vanished from the face of the earth around 100,000 years ago. What could possibly destroy a species that had proven itself virtually indestructible for 2 million years? How do you kill off the most successful human survivors in history? The answer isn't what you'd expect. It wasn't war, it wasn't disease, and it wasn't some catastrophic disaster. The truth about why Homo erectus disappeared is far stranger and more fascinating than any extinction story we've ever uncovered. It involves climate change that turned. Chapter 1. The Great Exodus. Imagine being the first of your kind to step foot outside of Africa. Not just traveling to the next valley or crossing a river, but leaving the only continent where humans had ever existed and venturing into completely unknown territories filled with strange animals, alien landscapes, and climates no human had ever experienced. This wasn't just exploration. This was the first great human adventure. And Homo erectus were the pioneers who changed everything. Around 2 million years ago, when most early humans were still confined to the African savanna, something extraordinary happened. Homo erectus looked beyond the familiar horizons of their homeland and made a decision that would reshape the entire story of human evolution. They decided to leave Africa and see what lay beyond. This wasn't a casual migration. It was an epic journey that required incredible courage, adaptability, and survival skills that would make modern adventurers look like tourists. These early humans were venturing into territories where no human foot had ever stepped, facing predators they'd never encountered, and dealing with climates their bodies weren't specifically adapted for. The journey itself was mind-blowing. Starting from East Africa, they somehow made their way through the Sinai Peninsula, across the Middle East, and into Asia. But here's where it gets really incredible. They didn't just survive this journey, they thrived. Archaeological evidence shows that Homo erectus reached the Republic of Georgia by 1.8 million years ago, Java by 1.6 million years ago, and China by 1.7 million years ago. Think about what this means in practical terms. These weren't modern humans with GPS, supply lines, and support teams. They were early humans with stone tools and fire, navigating by landmarks and instinct, carrying everything they owned, and figuring out how to survive in completely new environments as they went. The speed of their expansion was remarkable. In evolutionary terms, they spread across 2 continents almost instantly. Recent discoveries in Java have revealed evidence of Homo erectus living in the lowlands of Sundaland, the vast area that connected Southeast Asia when sea levels were lower. They weren't just passing through. They were establishing thriving communities across an area spanning thousands of kilometers. But what drove them to leave Africa in the first place? The traditional explanation focuses on environmental pressures. Climate change that made parts of Africa less hospitable, competition from other early human species, or simply following animal migrations for hunting opportunities. But recent research suggests something more intriguing. They may have left because they could Homo erectus had developed something revolutionary, the first truly modern human body plan. They were tall, long-legged, and built for covering vast distances efficiently. Their anatomy was perfectly designed for long-distance walking and running across open terrain. Unlike earlier human species that were adapted for life in forests and woodlands, Homo erectus had bodies that were built for exploration. Their technological capabilities made long-distance travel possible. They were the first humans to consistently create and maintain fires, providing warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food. This fire technology was crucial for survival in climates that were much colder than anything humans had previously experienced. They also developed the Acheulean tool industry, sophisticated stone implements that represented a massive leap forward in human technology. These weren't crude choppers and scrapers. They were carefully designed, symmetrical tools that required advanced planning and skill to create. Most remarkably, the basic Acheulean design remained virtually unchanged for over 1 million years, suggesting it was so effective that there was no need for improvement. The implications of their exodus were staggering. For the first time in Earth's history, a human species was living on multiple continents simultaneously. Homo erectus populations in Africa were developing alongside completely separate populations in Asia, creating the first truly global human species. Their success in colonizing new territories was extraordinary. In Java, they established communities that would persist for over 1 million years. In China, they developed adaptations for surviving in much colder climates than any human had previously encountered. In Georgia, they created settlements that showed evidence of sophisticated social organization and resource management. But perhaps most impressive was their ability to adapt to completely different ecosystems while maintaining their core cultural and technological traditions. Homo erectus in tropical Java were using the same basic toolmaking techniques. Chapter 2. Masters of Fire and Stone. While you struggle to light a campfire with matches and lighter fluid, Homo erectus was creating and controlling fire over 1.5 million years ago, using nothing but stones, sticks, and incredible ingenuity. But calling them fire users does not capture the full scope of their mastery. They were the world's first energy engineers, transforming raw natural forces into tools for survival, technology, and social revolution. The discovery and control of fire wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was the moment that changed everything about what it meant to be human. Fire gave Homo erectus power over the darkness, protection from predators, the ability to cook food, warmth in cold climates, and gathering places that fostered the first human communities. They didn't just discover fire, they invented civilization. Evidence for Homo erectus fire control goes back an incredible 1.7 million years, found in places like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. This isn't just scattered ash that could have come from lightning strikes or natural fires. This is evidence of controlled burning deep inside caves where natural fires couldn't reach, with organized hearths, deliberately burned bones, and ash deposits that show systematic fire management. But the real genius of Homo erectus fire technology becomes clear when you understand what controlled fire actually required. They had to figure out how to create fire from scratch using friction methods, how to maintain fires for extended periods, how to transport fire from place to place, and how to manage different types of fires for different purposes. This wasn't just lighting a campfire. This was mastering one of the most dangerous and unpredictable forces in nature. Their fire technology was sophisticated beyond anything we'd expect from early humans. Archaeological sites show evidence of specialized hearths designed for different purposes. Cooking fires that could roast meat without burning it. Heating fires for warmth during cold nights. Tool-making fires that could heat-treat stone to improve napping, and social fires where communities gathered for interaction and planning. At sites like Zhaoqiudian in China, Homo erectus created elaborate fire management systems in caves that show evidence of continuous use for hundreds of thousands of years. These weren't temporary campsites. They were permanent fire-based communities that required understanding combustion, ventilation, fuel management, and safety protocols that kept people from being killed by smoke inhalation or accidental burns. The impact of fire control on human development was revolutionary. Cooking food made nutrients more bioavailable and easier to digest, allowing Homo erectus to extract more energy from the same amount of food. This dietary improvement helped fuel the growth of larger brains and more energy-intensive lifestyles. Cooked food also killed bacteria and parasites, reducing disease and increasing survival rates. But fire wasn't just about food and warmth. It extended the usable hours of the day, allowing activities to continue after dark. Around fires, Homo erectus communities could engage in tool-making, food preparation, social interaction, and knowledge transfer during evening hours that would otherwise be spent hiding from nocturnal predators. Fire also provided protection from dangerous animals. Most predators instinctively avoid fire, so Homo erectus communities with controlled fires could sleep safely, store food without scavenging, and defend their territories more effectively. This security allowed them to develop more complex social structures and long-term planning that wouldn't be possible for constantly threatened populations. Their stone tool technology was equally revolutionary. Homo erectus created the Acheulean tool industry, the longest-lasting and most successful tool technology in human history. These weren't crude rocks with sharp edges. They were precisely engineered implements that required advanced understanding of stone properties, three-dimensional thinking, and manufacturing techniques that remained essentially unchanged for over 1,000,000 years. The signature tool of the Acheulean industry was the hand axe, a teardrop-shaped implement that was sharp on all edges and perfectly balanced for a variety of tasks. These tools could cut, chop, scrape, dig, and pound with efficiency that modern replicas can barely match. But what makes them truly remarkable is their standardization across vast distances and time periods. Hand axes found in Africa are virtually identical to those found in Asia and Europe, despite being separated by thousands of kilometers and hundreds of thousands of years. This suggests Homo erectus had developed cultural traditions so strong and educational systems so effective that they could maintain precise technological standards across their entire global range. The manufacturing process for Acheulean tools required remarkable skill and planning. Creating a symmetrical hand axe requires understanding the internal structure of stone, predicting how fractures will propagate, and executing a complex sequence of precise strikes in exactly the right order. Modern experimental archaeologists need months of practice to create tools that approach the quality routinely achieved by Homo erectus. Recent discoveries have revealed that their tool-making capabilities went far beyond stone implements. At sites in Java and China, archaeologists have found evidence that Homo erectus created tools from shells, bones, and almost certainly wood and bamboo that hasn't preserved in the archaeological record. They were comprehensive toolmakers who could create specialized implements from any available material. Their understanding of material science was sophisticated. They knew which types of stone produced the sharpest edges, which rocks could be heat-treated to improve their knapping properties, and which materials were best for different applications. They developed techniques for improving tool performance through controlled heating, careful selection of raw materials, and precise manufacturing methods. The tools themselves reveal complex understanding of physics and engineering. Hand axes are designed with optimal weight distribution for chopping efficiency. Cutting edges positioned at angles that maximize sharpness while maintaining durability, and gripping surfaces that allow precise control during use. These aren't accidental designs. They're engineering solutions developed through thousands of generations of refinement. But perhaps most impressive was their ability to innovate while maintaining tradition. Over the million-plus years of Acheulean technology, Homo erectus made subtle improvements to tool designs, developed specialized variants for different tasks, and created local innovations while maintaining the core technological principles that made their tools so effective. Archaeological evidence shows they were using these tools for an incredible variety of tasks: butchering large animals, processing plant materials, working wood and bone, digging for roots and water, and even creating other tools. The versatility of their implements allowed them to exploit resources and opportunities that would be impossible without sophisticated technology. Their tool-making wasn't just individual craftsmanship. It was community-based technology transfer. Young Homo erectus had to learn complex manufacturing techniques through observation, practice, and instruction from experienced toolmakers. This required social systems sophisticated enough to support apprenticeship, knowledge preservation, and quality control across generations. The combination of fire and stone technology created synergistic advantages that transformed Homo erectus' capabilities. Fire could be used to heat-treat stones for better tool-making, while improved tools made fire management easier and more effective. Together, these technologies allowed them to process a wider variety of foods, survive in harsher climates, and establish more permanent settlements. Recent research has revealed that their technological sophistication extended to landscape management. Homo erectus used controlled burning to modify environments, creating grasslands that attracted prey animals, clearing underbrush to improve visibility and movement, and managing plant communities to encourage useful species. They were also among the first humans to create composite tools, implements made from multiple materials working together. Evidence suggests they were hafting stone points onto wooden handles, creating spears and axes that were more effective than any single material tool could be. When we look at Homo erectus fire and stone technology, we're seeing the foundation of all subsequent human technological development. They proved that humans could master natural forces, engineer solutions to complex problems, and create tools that extended their capabilities far beyond their biological limitations. They weren't just tool users. They were the world's first engineers, transforming raw materials and natural forces into technologies that allowed them to thrive in any environment on Earth. Their mastery of fire and stone was the technological revolution that made everything else possible. Chapter 3. Built for the long haul. When you look at the skeleton of Homo erectus, you're seeing the first human body that could walk into any modern gym and not look out of place. These weren't primitive ape men stumbling around on knuckles. They were the first humans to evolve truly modern body proportions, and they were built like endurance athletes who could outperform most people alive today. The most complete Homo erectus skeleton we found is the famous Turkana boy, discovered in Kenya and dated to 1.6 million years ago. This adolescent skeleton reveals a body plan that was essentially modern from the neck down. Long legs, short arms, narrow pelvis, and proportions that would fit perfectly in today's world. But unlike modern humans who achieve fitness through training, Homo erectus was born with bodies optimized for incredible physical performance. Their legs were the key to everything. Homo erectus evolved the first truly long legs in human evolution, with lower limb proportions that were perfect for efficient, long-distance locomotion. These weren't just slightly longer legs. They were dramatic anatomical changes that transformed how humans moved through the world. Their femurs were longer and straighter than any previous human species, creating mechanical advantages that allowed them to cover vast distances with minimal energy expenditure. But it wasn't just leg length that made them extraordinary. It was the entire integration of their locomotor system. Their pelvises were narrower and more efficient than earlier humans, reducing the side-to-side motion that wastes energy during walking. Their spine curves were optimized for upright posture during long-distance movement. Their feet developed arches that acted like springs, storing and releasing energy with each step. The result was a human body that was essentially a biological walking machine. Modern biomechanical analysis suggests that Homo erectus could have maintained walking speeds that would challenge fit modern humans. And they could probably keep going for hours or even days without the fatigue that limits contemporary people. Their endurance capabilities were mind-blowing. These were humans who regularly walked across continents, not because they had to migrate seasonally like animals, but because their bodies made long distance travel so efficient that exploring new territories was actually easier than staying in one place and depleting local resources. Think about what this means in practical terms. A group of Homo erectus could probably walk from Africa to Asia over the course of a few months, covering 30 to 40 kilometers per day without particular strain, carrying their tools and supplies, and arriving at their destination in better physical condition than when they started. They were built for exploration on a scale that modern humans can barely comprehend. Their upper body strength was equally impressive, but in a different way than the raw power we see in Neanderthals. Homo erectus was built for efficient tool use and precise manipulation rather than overwhelming force. Their hands were essentially modern, with precision grips that allowed them to create and use sophisticated implements. Their arms and shoulders were optimized for repetitive motions like knapping stone tools and wielding implements for hours at a time. Recent analysis of Homo erectus bones shows evidence of incredible physical activity throughout their lives. Muscle attachment sites are large and robust, indicating that they were using their bodies at intensities that would challenge modern athletes. But unlike modern exercise that focuses on short-term performance, their physical capabilities were built for lifetime endurance. Their bones tell the story of lives spent in constant motion. Leg bones show adaptations to regular long-distance walking across varied terrain. Arm bones reveal patterns consistent with daily tool use and carrying heavy loads. Spinal modifications suggest they were regularly carrying significant weight over long distances. These weren't sedentary people who occasionally went for walks. They were nomadic athletes whose entire lifestyle required peak physical performance. Brain size in Homo erectus was significantly larger than earlier human species, averaging 900 to 1,200 cubic centimeters compared to about 600 cc in earlier humans. But more importantly, their brain organization appears to have been optimized for the cognitive demands of their active lifestyle. Areas involved in spatial reasoning, motor control, and environmental navigation were particularly well developed. Their sensory systems were adapted for their mobile lifestyle. Homo erectus had excellent distance vision for spotting landmarks, prey, and potential threats across open landscapes. Their hearing was sensitive to the sounds that would be important for traveling groups: animal calls, water sources, weather changes, and communication over moderate distances. But perhaps most remarkable was how their entire physiology was integrated for their nomadic lifestyle. Their digestive systems were efficient enough to extract maximum nutrition from variable food sources encountered during travel. Their immune systems were robust enough to handle exposure to new pathogens in unfamiliar territories. Their thermoregulation was effective enough to function in climates ranging from tropical heat to near-freezing conditions. Their growth patterns reveal interesting adaptations to their lifestyle. Turkana boy shows evidence of rapid growth rates similar to modern great apes, suggesting that young Homo erectus reached physical maturity quickly and could contribute to group survival at relatively early ages. This fast development would be crucial for populations that needed every member to be capable of long-distance travel and physical demands. The sexual dimorphism in Homo erectus was moderate. Males were larger than females, but not dramatically so. This suggests social systems where both sexes participated in the demanding physical activities required for their lifestyle, rather than extreme specialization where only males engaged in physically challenging tasks. Their tooth wear patterns show they were eating tough, fibrous foods that required significant chewing effort. But unlike earlier human species, whose massive teeth and jaw muscles dominated their facial architecture, Homo erectus had smaller teeth and more gracile faces, suggesting they were using tools and possibly fire to process food before eating it. Injury patterns in Homo erectus fossils reveal the physical demands of their lifestyle. They show evidence of stress fractures from repetitive walking, joint problems from carrying heavy loads, and occasional traumatic injuries consistent with active hunting and tool use. But they also Chapter 4. The First Global Citizens. Imagine being part of the first human species to establish communities on 3 different continents simultaneously. While earlier humans were confined to small regions of Africa, Homo erectus was creating the first global human civilization, with populations thriving from Spain to Java, from Georgia to South Africa. They weren't just travelers passing through. They were the world's first global citizens, establishing permanent communities that would persist for hundreds of thousands of years. The scope of their global presence was absolutely staggering. By 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus had established thriving populations across an area spanning over 15,000 kilometers. From the Atlantic coast of Africa to the Pacific islands of Southeast Asia, they were living in tropical rainforests, temperate woodlands, arid grasslands, mountainous regions, and coastal areas simultaneously. But what makes their global success even more remarkable is that they achieved it without any of the technologies we consider essential for long-distance communication and coordination. They had no writing systems, no domesticated animals for transport, no metal tools, and no formal institutions. Yet somehow they maintained cultural and technological connections across vast distances that allowed them to function as a coherent global species. Their ability to adapt to radically different environments while maintaining their core identity as Homo erectus was unprecedented in human evolution. In tropical Java, they developed techniques for exploiting marine resources, hunting in dense forests, and processing tropical plants. In temperate China, they created sophisticated cave-dwelling communities with elaborate fire management systems for surviving harsh winters. In Africa, they maintained the tool-making traditions and hunting strategies that had made them successful for hundreds of thousands of years. Recent underwater archaeological discoveries off the coast of Java have revealed just how extensive their Southeast Asian communities were. During ice ages when sea levels were much lower, Homo erectus was living across vast lowland areas that are now beneath the ocean. These weren't marginal populations eking out survival on coastlines. They were thriving inland communities with access to rivers, diverse plant resources, and abundant wildlife. Evidence from these submerged sites shows they had developed sophisticated resource management, strategies perfectly adapted to their tropical environment. They were collecting river shells, hunting water turtles, and processing a wide variety of plant foods. Cut marks on bones show they were actively hunting strong, healthy animals, not just scavenging weakened prey. They had mastered their environment so completely that they could afford to be selective about which animals they hunted. In China, Homo erectus created some of the most sophisticated early human communities ever discovered. The site at Jiaokudian shows evidence of continuous occupation for hundreds of thousands of years, with elaborate cave modifications, complex fire management systems, and tool-making areas that were used by generation after generation. These weren't temporary shelters. They were permanent communities that maintained cultural traditions across enormous spans of time. The Chinese Homo erectus populations developed unique adaptations to their colder, more seasonal environment. They created specialized tools for processing different types of prey, developed techniques for preserving food through harsh winters, and established social systems that could coordinate group activities across large cave communities. Evidence of possible cannibalism at some sites may indicate ritual practices or responses to extreme resource scarcity during particularly harsh periods. In Africa, Homo erectus maintained their ancestral homeland while simultaneously expanding across the globe. African populations show evidence of continuous technological development, with improvements to tool-making techniques, innovations in hunting strategies, and adaptations to changing climates. They served as the population reservoir that continued to fuel expansion into new territories while maintaining the genetic and cultural diversity that kept the species viable. European Homo erectus populations, while less well documented than those in Africa and Asia, show evidence of successful adaptation to temperate climates and seasonal resource availability. Sites in Spain and other Mediterranean locations reveal communities that could survive the challenging climate fluctuations of Pleistocene Europe while maintaining connections to populations in Africa and Asia. The genetic implications of their global distribution were profound. For the first time in human evolution, the same species was evolving simultaneously under completely different environmental pressures in multiple locations. This created regional variations in physical characteristics while maintaining overall species coherence, a pattern that would become central to later human evolution. But what is most remarkable about Homo erectus global citizenship is how they maintain technological and cultural connections across these vast distances. Acheulean hand axes found in Kenya are virtually identical to those found in India, despite being separated by thousands of kilometers and potentially hundreds of thousands of years. This suggests cultural transmission systems that could maintain precise technological standards across continental distances. Their success as global citizens required social innovations that we're only beginning to understand. They had to develop communication systems that could maintain group coordination during long-distance travel. They needed social structures that could integrate newcomers into established communities. They required cultural traditions that could preserve essential knowledge while allowing for local adaptations. Evidence suggests they may have maintained trade networks or at least regular contact between distant populations. Similar tool styles and techniques appear in widely separated locations within relatively short time periods, suggesting information and possibly materials were being exchanged across their entire range. This would have required social systems sophisticated enough to support long-distance relationships and cultural exchange. Their global communities also show evidence of caring for disabled and elderly members, a practice that would have been particularly challenging for nomadic populations. The survival of individuals with significant physical limitations suggests social. Chapter 5. The Laziness Paradox. Here's where the story of Homo erectus takes a strange and controversial turn. After nearly 2 million years of incredible success, innovation, and global expansion, something peculiar started happening. Archaeological evidence from their later periods suggests that the most successful human species in history was developing what researchers have called least effort strategies. Essentially, they were getting lazy. This isn't the kind of accusation you'd expect to level against a species that had conquered 3 continents, survived countless ice ages, and maintained thriving communities for longer than any human species before or since. But recent archaeological research from sites in the Arabian Peninsula and across their range has revealed a puzzling pattern. As time went on, Homo erectus seemed to be putting less effort into their tools, their exploration, and their innovation. Dr. Cherry Shipton from the Australian National University, who has studied Homo erectus extensively, put it bluntly, they really don't seem to have been pushing themselves. I don't get the sense they were explorers looking over the horizon. This is a remarkable statement about a species that had previously been the ultimate explorers, spreading from Africa to Asia and establishing communities in every environment they encountered. The evidence for this laziness appears in multiple aspects of their behavior and technology. Toolmaking became increasingly standardized and simplified. While early Homo erectus created beautifully crafted, symmetrical hand axes that required significant skill and effort, Later populations often made cruder implements that got the job done, but showed less attention to quality and aesthetics. Their resource procurement strategies also show signs of taking the easiest available options. Instead of traveling long distances to obtain high-quality stone for toolmaking, later Homo erectus populations often used whatever materials were locally available, even if they were clearly inferior. They seemed to prioritize convenience over quality in ways that would have been unthinkable for their ancestors. Site selection patterns reveal similar tendencies. Early Homo erectus established communities in locations that provided optimal access to water, food sources, tool-making materials, and defensive advantages. Later populations often settled in locations that were merely adequate, suggesting they were choosing the first acceptable site rather than seeking out the best possible options. Their exploration patterns changed dramatically. While early Homo erectus were constantly pushing into new territories and adapting to new environments, later populations showed much less interest in expansion. Archaeological evidence suggests they became increasingly sedentary, staying in familiar areas rather than seeking new opportunities. But here's where the laziness interpretation becomes controversial. Was this really laziness, or was it something more complex? Some researchers argue that what looks like decreased effort might actually reflect a species that had become so successful that they no longer needed to push themselves to the limits to survive. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus had been operating at peak performance because survival demanded it. They had to be innovative, energetic, and constantly adaptive because failure meant death. But by their later periods, they had become so good at what they did that they could afford to relax their standards. Their tool technology had become so refined and effective that crude implements could still accomplish most necessary tasks. Their environmental knowledge had become so complete that they could predict resource availability and didn't need to constantly explore for new options. Their social systems had become so stable that they could rely on established networks rather than constantly building new relationships. From this perspective, their laziness might actually represent the ultimate success story. They had solved the fundamental problems of human survival so effectively that they could afford to coast on their achievements rather than constantly striving for improvement. But this apparent success may have contained the seeds of their downfall. In a rapidly changing world, the ability to adapt quickly and push beyond previous limits becomes crucial for survival. A species that has become comfortable with good enough solutions may find itself unable to respond effectively when environmental pressures demand innovation and change. The timing of their behavioral changes coincides ominously with increasing environmental instability during the Middle and Late Pleistocene. As climate change accelerated and new species began competing for resources, the very success that had allowed Homo erectus to relax their standards may have left them unprepared for new challenges. Archaeological evidence shows that while Homo erectus was developing these least-effort strategies, other human lineages were becoming increasingly innovative and adaptable. Early modern humans were developing more sophisticated tool technologies, more complex social organizations, and more flexible adaptation strategies. The contrast between stagnating Homo erectus populations and rapidly innovating competitors becomes stark when viewed across the archaeological record. Their reduced exploration and innovation may have created a dangerous feedback loop. As they became less likely to seek out new territories and resources, they became more dependent on familiar areas and established patterns. This increased vulnerability to local environmental changes and reduced their ability to respond to competition from other human species. The laziness paradox reveals a fundamental tension in evolutionary success. The very adaptations that made Homo erectus incredibly successful for nearly 2 million years, their standardized tool technology, their reliable survival strategies, Their stable social systems may have become liabilities when rapid change demanded flexibility and innovation. But calling it laziness may be too simplistic. What we're seeing might be better described as evolutionary conservatism, a tendency to stick with strategies that had worked for hundreds of thousands of generations rather than constantly seeking improvement. This isn't necessarily a character flaw. It's a rational response to success. The problem was that the world was changing faster than their conservative strategies could accommodate. Climate. Chapter 6. The Climate Trap. The irony of the Homo erectus extinction is almost poetic in its cruelty. After surviving every ice age, volcanic winter, and climate catastrophe that Earth could throw at them for nearly 2 million years, they were finally defeated by the very type of environmental change they had previously mastered. But this wasn't just any climate change. It was a perfect storm of environmental shifts that turned their greatest refuge into an inescapable death trap. By 117,000 years ago, the last known populations of Homo erectus were concentrated in Java, Indonesia, specifically in the area around the Solo River near the village of Anggandong. This region had served as their final stronghold, a tropical refuge where they could maintain their traditional lifestyle while the rest of the world was rapidly changing around them. Java had been good to Homo erectus. For over 1 million years, this tropical paradise had provided everything they needed: abundant water from rivers and springs, diverse plant foods available year-round, rich marine resources from coastal areas, and large mammals perfect for their traditional hunting strategies. The climate was stable, the resources were predictable, and the environment matched perfectly with the lifestyle that had made them successful for so long. But around 120,000 years ago, something began to change. The climate of Java was shifting from the open woodlands and mixed forest that Homo erectus preferred to dense, humid rainforest that was completely alien to their way of life. This wasn't just a minor environmental adjustment. It was a fundamental transformation that eliminated the ecological niche they'd occupied for hundreds of thousands of years. The change was driven by global climate patterns associated with glacial cycles, but its effects on Java were uniquely devastating for Homo erectus. As ice sheets expanded in northern latitudes, atmospheric circulation patterns changed, bringing increased rainfall and humidity to Southeast Asia. The relatively open landscapes where Homo erectus had thrived for so long were being replaced by dense jungle that was virtually impassable and completely unsuitable for their hunting and survival strategies. Imagine trying to hunt large mammals with Acheulean hand axes in dense rainforest where visibility is limited to a few meters, and the understory is so thick that movement requires constant machete work. Picture attempting to maintain fires for cooking and warmth in an environment where everything is constantly wet and dry. Fuel is virtually impossible to find. Consider the challenge of maintaining social groups and knowledge transmission when the landscape itself prevents effective communication and coordination. The rainforest transformation eliminated virtually every aspect of the environment that Homo erectus depended on. Open areas where they could spot and track prey disappeared under dense canopy. Rivers became choked with vegetation and difficult to access. The large mammals they preferred to hunt either migrated away or went extinct, replaced by smaller, more elusive rainforest species that required completely different hunting techniques. But the most devastating aspect of the climate trap was that it was inescapable. By the time the environmental changes became severe enough to threaten Homo erectus survival, they were already isolated on Java with no viable escape routes. Sea levels were too high for them to walk to other landmasses, and they lacked the maritime technology needed for ocean travel. Recent geological research has revealed just how rapid and complete this environmental transformation was. Core samples from ancient lake beds show that the change from woodland to rainforest occurred over just a few thousand years, practically instantaneous in geological terms. For a species that had evolved strategies optimized for stable, predictable environments, this rate of change was simply too fast to accommodate. The fossil evidence from Ngandong tells a haunting story of their final days. The site contains the remains of at least 12 Homo erectus individuals, all adults, who appear to have died in what researchers describe as a mass death event. Their bones show no evidence of violence or disease, suggesting they weren't killed by predators or competing human groups. Instead, they seem to have been overwhelmed by environmental forces beyond their control. The most likely scenario is that these final Homo erectus were caught in a massive flood that swept them downstream and deposited their remains at Ngandong. But this wasn't just a random natural disaster. It was the kind of extreme weather event that the new rainforest climate made increasingly common and devastating. In their traditional woodland environment, Homo erectus had developed sophisticated strategies for dealing with floods, storms, and other weather emergencies. They knew which areas were safe during extreme weather, how to find shelter and dry ground, and how to predict and prepare for dangerous conditions. But the new rainforest environment eliminated their familiar landmarks, changed water flow patterns, and created weather systems they had never encountered. The climate trap was made even more deadly by the fact that it eliminated their traditional coping mechanisms. In previous environmental crises, Homo erectus had always been able to adapt by moving to new areas, modifying their hunting strategies, or developing new technologies. But the rainforest transformation removed all these options simultaneously. Migration was impossible because they were trapped on an island surrounded by ocean. Their traditional hunting techniques were useless in dense forest where large prey was scarce and visibility was limited. Their fire technology, which had been central to their survival for over 1 million years, became nearly impossible to maintain in the constantly wet conditions. Even their social systems, which had been so effective for preserving and transmitting survival knowledge, may have broken down under the stress of rapid environmental change. The extended family groups and community networks that had made them successful required open areas for communication and coordination. Dense rainforests would have fragmented their social groups and made the knowledge sharing that was crucial to their survival much more difficult. Archaeological evidence suggests that the final Homo erectus populations were under severe stress in their last thousands of years. Tool quality declined, suggesting either reduced skill levels or simply the difficulty of finding suitable materials in the new environment. Site selection became more random, indicating they may have lost their traditional environmental knowledge that had guided location choices for hundreds of thousands of years. The timing of their extinction coincides exactly with the completion of the woodland to rainforest transition. Once the environmental change was complete, Homo erectus disappears entirely from the fossil record. There's no evidence of gradual population decline or adaptation to the new conditions. They simply vanish, suggesting the new environment was completely incompatible with their survival. Chapter 7. The competition factor. While Homo erectus was developing their least effort strategies and getting trapped by climate change, something else was happening that would prove equally devastating to their long-term survival. New players were entering the game, other human species with capabilities that directly challenged everything that had made Homo erectus successful for nearly 2 million years. The competition factor in Homo erectus extinction is complex and controversial, partly because we're still discovering who these competitors were and how they interacted with the established Homo erectus populations. But the evidence is mounting that the final chapters of Homo erectus history were shaped by encounters with other human lineages that had capabilities they couldn't match. The most obvious competitors were early modern humans, Homo sapiens, who were beginning to expand out of Africa around 70,000 to 60,000 years ago. But recent genetic and archaeological evidence suggests the competitive landscape was much more complex. involving mysterious human populations like the Denisovans and possibly other unknown lineages that were developing new survival strategies. The timing of these encounters was crucial. The latest Homo erectus populations, dated to around 117,000 to 108,000 years ago in Java, were just beginning to face the climate pressures that would ultimately destroy them when other human species were reaching peak innovation and expansion. They were dealing with environmental challenges while simultaneously facing competition from humans with superior technologies and adaptation strategies. Recent discoveries in Java have revealed tantalizing evidence of potential contact between late Homo erectus and other human species. Cut marks on animal bones and hunting strategies found at 140,000-year-old sites show techniques that were unknown in earlier Homo erectus populations but are characteristic of more advanced human species from mainland Asia. This suggests knowledge transfer or direct interaction between different human lineages. But was this contact beneficial or harmful to Homo erectus? The archaeological evidence is ambiguous. On one hand, they appear to have learned new hunting techniques that made them more effective at exploiting certain types of prey. On the other hand, they may have been forced into marginal territories and less optimal resources by more competitive human populations. The competitive advantages of other human species over late Homo erectus were significant and multifaceted. Early modern humans were developing much more sophisticated tool technologies, including composite tools, specialized hunting equipment, and advanced processing techniques that allowed them to exploit resources more efficiently than traditional Acheulean technology. Their social organizations were also more complex and flexible than those of Homo erectus. While Homo erectus had maintained relatively stable, traditional social structures for hundreds of thousands of years, newer human species were developing dynamic social systems that could adapt quickly to changing conditions and opportunities. Language capabilities may have been a crucial competitive factor. While Homo erectus clearly had some form of communication system sophisticated enough to maintain cultural traditions across vast distances and time periods, emerging human species may have had more advanced linguistic abilities that allowed for better coordination, knowledge sharing, and social organization. The population dynamics were also working against Homo erectus. Their populations had always been relatively small and dispersed, which had been an advantage during their expansion phase, but became a liability when facing competition from larger, more densely packed human populations that could support more complex technologies and social systems. Genetic evidence suggests that some late Homo erectus populations may have actually interbred with other human species, similar to what we know happened between Neanderthals and modern humans. Recent analysis of Denisovan DNA shows archaic human genetic contributions that could potentially include Homo erectus heritage, though this remains highly speculative. If interbreeding did occur, it may have been both an opportunity and a threat for Homo erectus populations. Genetic exchange could have introduced beneficial adaptations and increased population diversity, but it could also have led to genetic absorption, where Homo erectus lineages were gradually incorporated into other human populations and lost their distinct identity. The competitive pressures weren't just about direct confrontation or resource competition. They were also about adaptation rates and rapidly changing environments. While Homo erectus was struggling to adapt to rainforest conditions in Java, other human species were developing the technological and social flexibility needed to thrive in diverse and changing environments. Archaeological evidence from mainland Asia shows that around 100,000 to 80,000 years ago, human populations were developing increasingly sophisticated hunting technologies, including potentially the first projectile weapons that could kill large prey from safe distances. These technological advantages would have made traditional Homo erectus hunting strategies less competitive and possibly obsolete. The social learning capabilities of emerging human species may have been particularly important. While Homo erectus had proven ability to maintain stable cultural traditions, newer human lineages were developing systems for rapid innovation and knowledge accumulation that allowed them to adapt to new challenges much more quickly. Maritime technologies were another crucial competitive advantage. While Homo erectus remained trapped on Java when sea levels rose, other human species were developing the boats and navigation skills needed for island travel. This gave them access to new territories and resources while leaving Homo erectus increasingly isolated. But the competition factor wasn't necessarily about direct conflict or aggression. Many researchers believe that human species interactions during this period were more complex, involving cooperation, knowledge exchange, and possibly even intermarriage alongside competition for resources and territories. The demographic implications of competition were profound. Even without direct conflict, the presence of more efficient and adaptable human populations could have gradually reduced the territories and resources available to Homo erectus. Over time, this competitive pressure could have forced them into increasingly marginal areas where survival became more difficult. Recent analysis of late Homo erectus sites shows evidence of declining population sizes and increasing isolation between communities. This pattern is consistent with competitive pressure from other human species that was gradually fragmenting and reducing their populations even before the final climate crisis. The competitive factor may have also influenced their behavioral changes during their final periods. Chapter 8. The mysterious encounters in the final chapters of Homo erectus history. Something extraordinary and mysterious was happening that we're only beginning to understand. Hidden in the archaeological record are tantalizing clues suggesting that the last Homo erectus populations weren't just struggling alone against climate change and extinction. They were encountering other human species in ways that may have changed both groups forever. The most intriguing evidence comes from recent underwater archaeological sites off Java, where 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains have been found alongside evidence of hunting and food processing techniques that are completely unknown from earlier Homo erectus populations. These aren't just minor variations in their traditional methods. They're entirely new approaches to survival that suggest knowledge transfer from other human lineages. The mystery deepens when we consider the timing and geography of these encounters. At 140,000 years ago, Southeast Asia was becoming a crossroads where multiple human lineages were converging. Early modern humans were beginning their expansion out of Africa. The enigmatic Denisovans were established across Asia, and possibly other unknown human species were moving through the region. Java may have been the meeting ground where several branches of the human family tree intersected for the first time. Archaeological evidence suggests that late Homo erectus learned to hunt strong, healthy bovids using techniques that were characteristic of more advanced human species from mainland Asia. This represents a dramatic departure from their traditional hunting strategies and suggests either direct contact with other humans or observation and imitation of superior hunting methods. But who were these mysterious teachers? The most likely candidates are the Denisovans, a human species known primarily from genetic traces in modern populations rather than actual fossils. Genetic evidence shows that Denisovans were widespread across Asia and even reached as far as Southeast Asia, making contact with Homo erectus populations entirely plausible. The possibility of Homo erectus Denisovan interactions is particularly fascinating because it could explain some of the puzzling genetic signals found in modern Southeast Asian populations. Some archaic human DNA found in these populations doesn't clearly match either Neanderthal or known Denisovan lineages, leading researchers to speculate about contributions from other human species, possibly including Homo erectus. Recent analysis of late Homo erectus skulls from Java shows some unusual characteristics that were present in earlier populations. They had larger brain sizes and different skull proportions that some researchers interpret as evidence of possible hybridization with other human species. If these changes represent genetic contributions from Denisovans or other human lineages, it would make late Homo erectus a hybrid population rather than a pure lineage. The implications of such encounters would be profound. Interbreeding between Homo erectus and other human species could have introduced new genetic variants that affected everything from cognitive abilities to physical characteristics to disease resistance. It might have given late Homo erectus populations advantages that helped them survive longer than they otherwise could have. But genetic exchange could also have been disruptive to Homo erectus populations. Hybridization sometimes leads to reduced fertility, developmental problems, or genetic incompatibilities that can harm rather than help population survival. The small size of late Homo erectus populations would have made them particularly vulnerable to any negative effects of interbreeding. The cultural implications of these mysterious encounters may have been even more significant than the genetic ones. Contact with other human species could have exposed Homo erectus to new technologies, social organizations, and survival strategies that challenged their traditional ways of life. Evidence from Java suggests that late Homo erectus populations were adopting new hunting techniques, possibly new tool-making methods, and potentially even new social behaviors. This cultural exchange might have been their attempt to compete with more advanced human species by learning and adapting their superior methods. But cultural contact could also have been psychologically and socially disruptive. Homo erectus had maintained stable cultural traditions for hundreds of thousands of years. Sudden exposure to radically different human societies with superior technologies and capabilities might have undermined their confidence in their traditional ways and created social instability within their communities. The timing of these encounters was particularly unfortunate for Homo erectus. They were already facing increasing environmental pressures from climate change when they encountered other human species with capabilities they couldn't match. The psychological impact of realizing they were no longer the most advanced humans on Earth might have been devastating for a species that had dominated the planet for nearly 2 million years. Some researchers speculate that contact with other human species might have contributed to the behavioral changes that characterize late Homo erectus, including their adoption of least-effort strategies. Realizing that their traditional approaches were being surpassed by other humans might have led to a kind of cultural depression where they stopped investing effort in innovation and improvement. Alternatively, the encounters might have inspired attempts at rapid cultural change that were unsuccessful because Homo erectus populations lacked the social and technological infrastructure needed to support major innovations. Trying to adopt advanced technologies without the cultural foundation to support them could have been counterproductive and destabilizing. The mysterious nature of these encounters is partly due to the limited fossil record from this crucial period. Most evidence for contact between different human species comes from genetic analysis of modern populations rather than direct archaeological evidence of interaction. This makes it difficult to determine exactly what happened when these different human lineages met. Recent discoveries are beginning to fill in some gaps in our understanding. Shell tools and unusual stone implements found at late Homo erectus sites suggest they were experimenting with new technologies, possibly learned from contact with other human species. These innovations represent departures from the Aculean tradition that had characterized their tool-making for over 1 million years. The geographic pattern of these mysterious encounters suggests they were most likely occurring along coastlines and river systems where different human populations would have been drawn to the same high-quality resources. These areas would have been natural meeting grounds where different species could observe each other's behaviors and potentially interact directly. Language barriers would have complicated any interactions between different human species. While all human lineages at this time probably had some form of communication system. They may not have been mutually intelligible. This could have limited cultural exchange to observation and imitation rather than direct instruction and knowledge transfer. The mysterious encounters raise profound questions about the nature of human species interactions during the Pleistocene. Were different human lineages generally cooperative, competitive, or simply indifferent to each other? Did they recognize each other as related species, or did they view each other as entirely different types of beings? Modern genetic evidence suggests that interbreeding between different human species was relatively common when they encountered each other. This implies a level of biological compatibility and possibly social acceptance that challenges simple models of human species competition and replacement. The encounters between Homo erectus and other human species may have been among the most significant events in human evolutionary history, yet they remain largely hidden in the archaeological record. We're only beginning to understand how these interactions shaped the final chapters of Homo erectus history and influenced the development of later human populations. What we do know is that the last Homo erectus populations weren't living in isolation. They were part of a complex web of human species interactions that included knowledge transfer, possible genetic exchange, and cultural influence that affected all the human lineages involved. These mysterious encounters remind us that human evolution wasn't a simple linear progression from primitive to advanced. It was a complex process involving multiple human species that interacted in ways we're still trying to understand. The final chapters of Homo erectus history were written not in isolation but in the context of the broader human story that was unfolding across Asia during one of the most dynamic periods in our evolutionary history. The mysteries surrounding these encounters continue to drive new research and discoveries that are reshaping our understanding of human evolution and the complex relationships between different human species during the Pleistocene. Chapter 9. The Last Stand in the Humid Forests of Java, around 117,000 years ago. The final act of one of evolution's greatest success stories was playing out. The last known population of Homo erectus was making their final stand in what had once been their tropical paradise, but was rapidly becoming their evolutionary death trap. These weren't the confident, world-conquering humans who had first left Africa nearly 2 million years earlier. These were the survivors of a species in decline, clinging to existence in an increasingly hostile environment that was eliminating everything their ancestors had built over hundreds of thousands of years. The site near the village of Ngandong, along the Solo River in central Java, tells the haunting story of their final days. Here, archaeologists have found the remains of at least 12 Homo erectus individuals, all adults, all apparently killed in the same catastrophic event that marked the end of their species. Incredible journey through time. The Ngandong population represents the last flowering of Homo erectus evolution. Ironically, these final individuals had some of the largest brain sizes and most advanced skull features of any Homo erectus population. They weren't degenerating relics of a dying species. They were highly evolved humans who had continued to develop and adapt right up until the end. Their brains averaged nearly 1,200 cubic centimeters, approaching the size of modern human brains and significantly larger than earlier Homo erectus populations. Their skulls showed more modern proportions, with higher foreheads and less pronounced brow ridges than their ancestors. If we had encountered them 120,000 years ago, we might have been surprised by how human they looked, but appearances were deceiving. Despite their physical evolution, the Ngandong Homo erectus were trapped in an environmental crisis that their traditional survival strategies couldn't solve. The open woodlands and mixed forests where their ancestors had thrived for over 1 million years were disappearing, replaced by dense rainforest that was completely unsuitable for their way of life. Archaeological evidence from their final period shows a population under severe stress. Tool quality had declined significantly from the beautiful, symmetrical hand axes that had characterized their species for so long. The implements found at Ngandong sites are functional but crude, suggesting either reduced skill levels or simply the difficulty of maintaining traditional standards in a rapidly changing environment. Their resource procurement strategies had also changed dramatically. Instead of the selective, high-quality approaches that had characterized earlier Homo erectus populations, the Ngandong humans were taking whatever they could get. Stone tools were made from locally available materials regardless of quality. Food remains suggest they were eating a much broader range of species, including many that would have been considered suboptimal by their ancestors. The site itself tells a story of environmental catastrophe. Geological analysis shows that the Ngandong area was subject to increasingly frequent and severe flooding as climate change altered rainfall patterns and river behavior. The dense vegetation of the new rainforest environment made these floods more dangerous by creating debris dams and unpredictable water flows. The final Homo erectus population appears to have been concentrated in a relatively small area along the Solo River, a fraction of the vast territories their species had once controlled. They were no longer the global citizens who had maintained communities across 3 continents. They had become refugees in their own homeland, squeezed into an ever-shrinking refuge that was becoming less suitable for survival with each passing year. But they didn't go quietly. Evidence from Ngandong shows continued innovation and adaptation right up until the end. They were experimenting with new hunting techniques, possibly learned from contact with other human species. They were modifying their traditional tools to work better in forest environments. They were even developing new food processing methods suited to the plant and animal species available in their changed habitat. Recent underwater archaeological discoveries have revealed that the Ngandong population wasn't completely isolated. During periods of lower sea level, they had access to the lowland areas of Sundaland, where they maintained more traditional hunting and gathering practices. These expeditions to familiar environments may have provided crucial resources that allowed them to survive longer than they otherwise could have. The evidence suggests they were maintaining complex social relationships and cultural traditions even under extreme stress. The fact that 12 individuals died together and were deposited in the same location suggests they were still living in coordinated groups with social bonds strong enough to keep them together during the crisis that killed them. Their final catastrophe appears to have been a massive flood that struck during a period of extreme weather associated with climate change. The victims show no signs of disease, violence, or gradual starvation. They seem to have been healthy, active adults who were suddenly overwhelmed by environmental forces beyond their control. The flood that killed them may have been similar to the extreme weather events that are becoming more common in our modern era of climate change. Rising temperatures and changing precipitation patterns had made Java's weather systems increasingly unstable and unpredictable. The same environmental changes that were turning their habitat into rainforests were also creating more frequent and severe storms. Geological evidence shows that the Solo River had become much more dangerous during the period when the last Homo erectus were living along its banks. Climate change had altered vegetation patterns throughout the watershed, leading to increased erosion, more frequent flooding, and unpredictable changes in water flow. What had once been a reliable source of water and transportation had become a death trap. Irony of their final location is profound. The Solo River Valley had been home to Homo erectus populations for over 1 million years. Some of the earliest Java fossils were found in this same region, making it one of the longest continuously occupied human sites on Earth. They were making their last stand in the place where their species had first established itself outside of Africa. But the Solo River Valley of 117,000 years ago was a very different place from the open woodlands where their ancestors had thrived. Dense rainforest had replaced familiar landscapes. The large mammals they preferred to hunt had migrated away or gone extinct. The plant foods they knew how to process were no longer available. Even the river itself had changed, becoming more dangerous and unpredictable. Their final defeat wasn't due to any failing on their part. They had adapted and innovated as much as any species could reasonably be expected to do. They had learned new hunting techniques, modified their tools for forest environments, expanded their diet to include new food sources, and maintained social cohesion under incredible stress. The problem was that the rate of environmental change had exceeded their capacity for adaptation. The transformation from woodland to rainforest had occurred over just a few thousand years, rapid enough to eliminate their traditional survival strategies, but too fast for them to develop entirely new approaches to living in dense forest environments. Recent analysis of their remains shows they were still maintaining good nutrition and health right up until the end. They weren't a population in gradual decline. They were healthy, active humans who were suddenly overwhelmed by a catastrophic event they couldn't predict or control. The Ngandong site represents more than just the end of a species. It's the end of an entire way of life that had been successful for longer than any human lifestyle before or since. The last Homo erectus weren't just the final members of their species. They were the last practitioners of humanity's most enduring survival strategy. Their final stand lasted hundreds or possibly thousands of years as they struggled to adapt to conditions that were fundamentally incompatible with their evolved capabilities. They fought against extinction with every tool and strategy at their disposal, innovating and adapting right up until the moment when the environment finally overwhelmed them. When the floods finally claimed the last of them, it marked the end of humanity's longest and most successful chapter. Homo erectus had dominated the planet for nearly 2 million years, survived every previous crisis, and established the foundation for all subsequent human development. Their final defeat at Ngandong was no failure. It was the tragic end of an incredible success story that had simply run out of time. The last stand of Homo erectus reminds us that even the most successful adaptations have limits, and that survival in a rapidly changing world requires not just strength and intelligence, but also the flexibility to abandon even the most successful strategies when conditions demand fundamental change. Chapter 10. The Great Paradox. Here, that's the most mind-bending aspect of the Homo erectus story. Their extinction might represent the greatest paradox in evolutionary history. The very traits that made them the most successful human species ever, their incredible stability, their time-tested survival strategies, their mastery of traditional technologies, may have been exactly what doomed them when the world demanded rapid change. Think about it. Homo erectus achieved something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. They created a lifestyle so successful that it remained essentially unchanged for nearly 2 million years. Their Acheulean hand axe technology was so effective that they used virtually the same design for over 1 million years. Their social systems were so stable that they maintained cultural traditions across hundreds of thousands of generations. Their survival strategies were so reliable that they conquered 3 continents and survived every climate catastrophe the planet could produce. This level of evolutionary success is almost unimaginable. For comparison, our own species has existed for only about 300,000 years, and we've already gone through dozens of major technological and social revolutions. Homo erectus achieved something we never have. They found a way of life that worked so well they didn't need to change it for geological ages. But here's the paradox. Their incredible success may have been precisely what made them vulnerable to extinction. By becoming so perfectly adapted to their traditional way of life, They may have lost the flexibility needed to respond to rapid environmental change. Their million-year-old hand axe technology was undeniably effective. These tools could cut, chop, scrape, and pound with remarkable efficiency. They were durable, reliable, and versatile enough to handle almost any task their users encountered. The fact that the basic design remained unchanged for so long suggests it was close to optimal for their needs. But when environmental conditions began changing rapidly, their commitment to traditional technology may have become a liability. While other human species were developing specialized tools for different environments and tasks, Homo erectus continued to rely on their time-tested, Herculean implements even when they were no longer optimal for new conditions. Their social systems showed similar patterns. The stability that had allowed them to maintain cultural traditions across vast distances and time periods may have made them resistant to the rapid social innovations that were becoming necessary for survival in a changing world. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that other human species during the late Pleistocene were developing increasingly complex and flexible social organizations. They were creating specialized roles, developing trade networks, establishing long-distance communication systems, and experimenting with new forms of cooperation and coordination. Homo erectus populations, by contrast, seem to have maintained relatively traditional social structures right up until their extinction. While this stability had been a tremendous advantage during their expansion and establishment phases, it may have prevented them from developing the social innovations needed to compete with more dynamic human populations. The paradox extends to their exploration and innovation patterns. Early Homo erectus had been incredible explorers and innovators, constantly pushing into new territories and developing new survival strategies. But their later populations showed much less interest in exploration and innovation, preferring to stick with familiar territories and proven strategies. This conservative approach made perfect sense from their perspective. Why take risks when your current strategies had been working successfully for hundreds of thousands of years? Why explore new territories when you already control vast areas with abundant resources? Why develop new technologies when your existing tools were perfectly adequate for your needs? But in a rapidly changing world, this risk-averse approach became dangerous. While Homo erectus was playing it safe, other human species were taking the risks that led to breakthrough innovations in technology, social organization, and environmental adaptation. The great paradox reveals a fundamental tension in evolutionary success. Traits that promote survival and reproduction under stable conditions can become liabilities when conditions change rapidly. What evolutionary biologists call evolutionary constraints, the limitations imposed by previous adaptations, can prevent species from responding effectively to new challenges. Homo erectus had become so specialized for their particular way of life that they couldn't adapt quickly enough when that way of life became obsolete. Their expertise had become a form of evolutionary tunnel vision that prevented them from seeing and pursuing alternative strategies. Modern evolutionary theory recognizes this as a common pattern in extinction events. Species that are highly specialized for specific ecological niches often struggle when those niches disappear or change rapidly. Generalists, species that maintain flexibility and can exploit multiple niches, tend to survive better during periods of rapid environmental change. Irony is that early Homo erectus had been successful precisely because they were generalists. They could adapt to any environment, exploit any available resources, and develop strategies for surviving in completely unfamiliar territories. But over time, their success in mastering their traditional lifestyle may have made them more specialized and less adaptable. Recent research in evolutionary biology suggests that long-term evolutionary success can actually select against the flexibility needed for surviving rapid change. Species that are perfectly adapted to stable conditions may lose the genetic and behavioral diversity that would allow them to respond to new challenges. This process might explain why Homo erectus showed declining innovation and exploration in their later periods. Natural selection may have favored individuals who were especially good at traditional survival strategies while eliminating variants that maintained flexibility and innovative capability. The great paradox also reveals something profound about the nature of intelligence and adaptation. Homo erectus was clearly highly intelligent. They developed sophisticated technologies, maintained complex social systems, and successfully adapted to diverse environments around the world. But intelligence isn't just about solving current problems. It's also about maintaining the flexibility to solve future problems that haven't been encountered yet. Their commitment to traditional solutions, while rational based on their experience, may have prevented them from developing the cognitive flexibility needed for rapid adaptation to new conditions. They had become experts in one way of being human, but expertise can sometimes interfere with learning new approaches. The paradox extends to their physical adaptations as well. Their bodies were perfectly designed for their traditional lifestyle, long-distance walking, tool use, and survival in open environments. But these same adaptations may have made it difficult for them to succeed in the dense forest environments that were replacing their preferred habitats. Modern studies of evolutionary adaptation show that physical specializations can constrain future evolutionary options. Once a species commits to particular anatomical adaptations, it becomes difficult to develop radically different body plans even when environmental conditions change. The great paradox of Homo erectus' success and failure provides important insights for understanding human evolution and even contemporary human challenges. It shows that long-term success requires balancing stability with flexibility, tradition with innovation, and expertise with adaptability. Their story suggests that sustainable success comes not from finding the perfect solution and sticking with it forever, but from maintaining the capacity to develop new solutions when conditions change. The most successful species and societies are those that can preserve what works while remaining open to fundamental change when necessary. The paradox also highlights the importance of diversity in evolutionary success. Populations and species that maintain genetic, behavioral, and cultural diversity are better positioned to survive rapid change because they have more options available when traditional approaches become obsolete. Modern human societies face similar paradoxes. Our incredible success in developing industrial and technological systems has created dependencies and specializations that might make it difficult to adapt to rapid environmental and social changes. Like Homo erectus, we must balance the benefits of our successful traditions with the need to maintain flexibility for unknown future challenges. The great paradox of Homo erectus reminds us that success and failure are often more closely related than we realize. The traits that make us successful in one context can become limitations in another. True evolutionary wisdom lies in understanding when to hold on to what works and when to let go of even our greatest achievements in favor of new approaches. Their story isn't just about an extinct human species. It's about the fundamental challenge of adapting to change while preserving what makes us successful. It's a paradox that every successful species, society, and individual must eventually confront. How do you remain true to what made you successful while staying flexible enough to survive in a changing world? Chapter 11. The genetic echoes. Even though Homo erectus vanished from the Earth over 100,000 years ago, their story doesn't end with extinction. Hidden in the DNA of modern human populations are mysterious genetic echoes that suggest our relationship with these ancient relatives was far more complex and intimate than we ever imagined. Recent genetic discoveries are revealing that Homo erectus may not have simply disappeared. They may have become part of us. The genetic evidence for Homo erectus contributions to modern humans is still emerging and controversial, but it's accumulating in ways that are forcing scientists to reconsider everything we thought we knew about human evolution and the fate of our extinct relatives. The first clues came from analysis of Denisovan DNA, the mysterious human species known primarily from genetic traces rather than fossils. When scientists sequenced Denisovan genomes from caves in Siberia, they found something unexpected: genetic segments that didn't match any known human lineage, including modern humans, Neanderthals, or the Denisovans themselves. These ghost genetic sequences appear to come from an even more ancient human species that interbred with Denisovans hundreds of thousands of years ago. The timing, geographic location, and genetic characteristics of these mysterious sequences are consistent with contributions from Homo erectus populations that encountered Denisovans in Asia. If this interpretation is correct, it means Homo erectus genes are still circulating in modern human populations, passed down through a complex chain of interbreeding events that connected ancient human species across hundreds of thousands of years. We might literally be carrying genetic gifts from the most successful human species in history. The geographic pattern of these potential Homo erectus genetic contributions is particularly intriguing. They appear to be most common in Southeast Asian and Melanesian populations, exactly the regions where late Homo erectus populations were known to have survived the longest. This geographic correlation supports the possibility that genetic exchange occurred between Homo erectus and other human species in these areas. Recent analysis of ancient DNA from Southeast Asian populations has revealed additional genetic anomalies that don't clearly fit patterns of Neanderthal or Denisovan ancestry. Some researchers speculate that these mysterious genetic segments could represent direct Homo erectus contributions to modern human populations, possibly through interbreeding, events that occurred during the final periods of Homo erectus existence. The potential genetic connection between Homo erectus and modern humans opens up fascinating possibilities about the deep ancestry of our species. Unlike the relatively recent interbreeding events between modern humans and Neanderthals that occurred around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, potential Homo erectus genetic contributions would trace back much deeper in time, possibly representing the most ancient human genetic lineages still present in modern populations. This deep ancestry connection could help explain some of the puzzling aspects of human genetic diversity that have long challenged researchers. The high levels of genetic variation found in some African populations, for instance, might partly reflect ancient genetic contributions from early Homo erectus lineages that never left Africa and continued to contribute to the gene pool of evolving human populations. Recent computational modeling of human genetic evolution has suggested that the patterns of genetic diversity we see in modern populations require more complex population histories than simple models of modern human evolution can account for. These models increasingly point toward scenarios involving genetic contributions from multiple archaic human species, possibly including Homo erectus. The timing of potential genetic exchange is crucial for understanding these deep ancestry connections. While the latest Homo erectus populations disappeared around 117,000 to 108,000 years ago, earlier populations could have contributed genes to the broader human gene pool hundreds of thousands of years earlier. These ancient genetic contributions could then have been carried forward through multiple generations of human evolution and population mixing. Homo erectus genetic contributions to modern humans are confirmed. They could have profound functional implications that are still influencing human biology today. Their nearly 2 million years of evolution and adaptation could have produced genetic innovations that provide specific advantages for survival and reproduction in various environments. Their expertise in long-distance locomotion and endurance could have produced genetic variants affecting muscle fiber composition, cardiovascular efficiency, and metabolic regulation that would be valuable for populations engaged in physically demanding lifestyles. Some researchers speculate that certain populations known for exceptional endurance capabilities might carry genetic variants that trace back to Homo erectus. Adaptations, thermoregulation, and climate adaptation represent another area where Homo erectus genetic contributions could be functionally significant. Their success in adapting to diverse climates from tropical Africa to temperate Asia could have produced genetic variants affecting heat tolerance, cold resistance, and metabolic adjustments to different environmental conditions. Cognitive traits related to spatial navigation, tool use, and environmental problem-solving could also reflect Homo erectus genetic influences. Their sophisticated spatial reasoning abilities, refined over hundreds of thousands of generations of tool-making and navigation, might have produced genetic variants that continue to influence cognitive performance in modern populations. Recent research on human genetic adaptation has identified numerous genetic variants that show evidence of positive natural selection in specific populations. Some of these adaptive variants are much older than typical estimates for modern human evolution, raising the possibility that they could represent genetic inheritances from archaic human species like Homo erectus. The distribution of potential Homo erectus genetic contributions appears to vary significantly between different modern human populations, creating population-specific patterns that reflect the complex history of human migration and genetic exchange during the Pleistocene. Southeast Asian populations show some of the strongest signals of archaic human genetic contributions that don't clearly match Neanderthal or known Denisovan patterns. These populations have the highest levels of genetic diversity outside Africa and show evidence of multiple waves of ancient genetic admixture that could potentially include Homo erectus contributions. Melanesian populations are particularly interesting because they show evidence of genetic contributions from multiple archaic human sources, including substantial Denisovan ancestry and additional mystery genetic segments that could represent other archaic human species. Their island environments would have been accessible to late Homo erectus populations during periods of lower sea level. Australian Aboriginal populations present another fascinating case. Their genetic isolation over the past 50,000 plus years has preserved ancient genetic patterns that might include traces of very early human genetic diversity. Some researchers have speculated that certain genetic characteristics of Australian populations could reflect ancient genetic contributions from early human species, possibly including Homo erectus. Even some African populations show genetic patterns that suggest more complex ancestral histories than simple models of modern human evolution would predict. The genetic diversity of African populations includes very ancient lineages that might represent continuing genetic contributions from early Homo erectus or related species that never left Africa. The potential discovery of Homo erectus genetic contributions to modern humans has significant implications for both genetic research technology and medical applications. Understanding these ancient genetic influences could provide new insights into human genetic diversity, disease susceptibility, and adaptation patterns. Pharmacogenomics, the study of how genetic variants affect drug responses, could be revolutionized by understanding ancient genetic contributions. If different populations carry different Homo erectus genetic variants, this could help explain population differences in drug metabolism disease susceptibility, and treatment responses. Disease resistance patterns might also reflect ancient genetic contributions. Homo erectus populations survived for nearly 2 million years in diverse environments with different pathogen loads. Genetic variants that provided disease resistance during their long evolutionary history could still be providing protection in modern populations. The study of genetic adaptation to high altitude, extreme climates, and challenging environments could benefit from understanding potential Homo erectus contributions. Their global success required adaptation to virtually every environment on Earth, and genetic variants that facilitated these adaptations could still be influencing human environmental adaptation. Today, reproductive biology and development might also be influenced by ancient genetic contributions. Homo erectus had different growth patterns and reproductive strategies than modern humans, and genetic variants affecting these traits could still be present in modern populations, potentially influencing everything from growth rates to fertility patterns. Identifying potential Homo erectus genetic contributions to modern humans represents one of the most challenging problems in current genetic research. Unlike Neanderthals and Denisovans, for whom we have high-quality ancient DNA sequences, Homo erectus genetic material has been extremely difficult to obtain due to the age of fossils and poor DNA preservation in tropical environments. Researchers are developing increasingly sophisticated computational methods for detecting ancient genetic contributions without direct ancient DNA comparisons. These approaches use patterns of genetic diversity, linkage relationships, and population-specific genetic signatures to infer the presence of archaic genetic contributions. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are becoming powerful tools for analyzing complex genetic datasets and identifying subtle patterns that might indicate ancient genetic admixture. These computational approaches can process enormous amounts of genetic data and detect signals that would be impossible to identify using traditional statistical methods. The development of new ancient DNA extraction and sequencing techniques is also opening up possibilities for recovering genetic material from previously unsuitable fossils. Recent breakthroughs in extracting DNA from extremely old and degraded specimens raise hopes that Homo erectus genetic material might eventually be recoverable. Environmental DNA analysis, the study of genetic material preserved in sediments and other environmental contexts, represents another frontier for potentially accessing Homo erectus genetic information. Ancient cave sediments, lake deposits, and other environmental contexts might preserve genetic traces of extinct human species. The potential genetic survival of Homo erectus through contributions to modern human populations has profound implications for how we understand human evolution and the nature of species boundaries during the Pleistocene. If confirmed, Homo erectus genetic contributions would demonstrate that human evolution during the Pleistocene was characterized by extensive genetic exchange between different human lineages rather than simple species replacement. This would support models of human evolution that emphasize continuity and gene flow rather than discrete speciation events. The concept of extinction itself becomes more complex when genetic contributions survive even after morphologically distinct lineages disappear. From a genetic perspective, Homo erectus might be considered partially extinct rather than completely extinct, with portions of their genetic legacy continuing to influence human evolution. The implications extend to our understanding of modern human origins and the relative contributions of different ancestral populations to contemporary genetic diversity. If multiple archaic human species contributed to modern human genetics, then our origins become a story of synthesis and integration rather than replacement and competition. Potential genetic connection between modern humans and Homo erectus also has implications for how we think about human diversity, conservation biology, and cultural heritage. If modern populations carry genetic legacies from our most successful ancestral species, this could change how we value and protect human genetic diversity. Indigenous populations that might carry significant archaic genetic contributions could be seen as custodians of irreplaceable genetic heritage that represents millions of years of human evolutionary history. This could provide additional scientific and ethical arguments for protecting indigenous rights and cultural autonomy. The study of potential Homo erectus genetic contributions also highlights the importance of genetic diversity for human adaptation and survival. Their success across diverse environments for nearly 2 million years demonstrates the value of genetic variants that might seem neutral or even slightly harmful in current environments but could become crucial for survival in changing conditions. The search for Homo erectus genetic echoes in modern human populations represents a rapidly evolving field with enormous potential for future discoveries. Advancing technology and expanding genetic datasets are creating new opportunities for detecting and analyzing ancient genetic contributions. Whole genome sequencing of additional populations, particularly from regions where Homo erectus was known to have lived, could reveal new patterns of archaic genetic admixture. Large-scale international genetic studies are accumulating the data needed for sophisticated analyses of ancient genetic contributions. The development of new statistical and computational methods for analyzing genetic diversity patterns will improve our ability to detect subtle traces of ancient genetic contributions. As these methods become more powerful and precise, we may discover genetic influences from extinct human species that are currently undetectable. The integration of genetic data with archaeological and paleontological evidence will provide additional context for understanding potential genetic contributions. Correlating genetic patterns with known distributions of extinct human species could strengthen evidence for specific genetic contributions. Even if direct genetic contributions from Homo erectus to modern humans are never definitively proven, their influence on human evolution was profound and lasting. They established the foundation for all subsequent human expansion and adaptation, developed the basic technologies and social systems that enable global human success, and created the evolutionary platform that allowed later human species to thrive. The genetic echoes of Homo erectus remind us that human evolution was not a simple story of one species replacing another, but a complex process of interaction, exchange, and gradual change that connected all human lineages across deep time. Whether or not we carry their genes, we certainly carry their legacy, the fundamental human capabilities for exploration, adaptation, and survival that they pioneered and perfected over nearly 2 million years of evolutionary success. Their genetic echoes, whether literal or metaphorical, continue to resonate through modern human populations, reminding us that we are the inheritors of humanity's longest and most successful evolutionary experiment. In studying these potential genetic connections, we're not just learning about our past. We're discovering how the achievements of our most successful ancestors might still be influencing our biology, our capabilities, and our potential for future adaptation and success. So here we stand, at the end of one of evolution's most incredible journeys, and the story of Homo erectus leaves us with a profound mystery wrapped in an evolutionary paradox. After nearly 2 million years of unprecedented success, longer than any human species before or since, the ultimate survivors were defeated not by their failures, but by the very success that had made them invincible for so long. We began this story asking how such successful humans could possibly vanish after conquering the world. And the answer turns out to be both simpler and more complex than anyone imagined. They were victims of their own perfection, trapped by evolutionary success so complete that it eliminated the flexibility they needed. When the world changed faster than their time-tested strategies could accommodate, the climate trap that finally claimed them in the rainforests of Java was just a final act in a longer tragedy of evolutionary constraints. Their million-year-old technologies, their stable social systems, their mastery of traditional survival strategies, everything that had made them the ultimate human survivors became their ultimate limitation when rapid change demanded radical adaptation. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their story is that it doesn't really end with extinction. Recent genetic discoveries suggest that Homo erectus may not have simply disappeared. They may have become part of us, contributing genetic gifts that continue to influence human populations across the OSS globe. Their legacy extends far beyond potential genetic contributions. Every time modern humans explore new territories, develop new technologies, or adapt to challenging environments, we're following paths that Homo erectus pioneered. They proved that humans could thrive anywhere on Earth, established the foundation for all subsequent human expansion, and created the template for global human civilization. The story of Homo erectus forces us to reconsider what we mean by evolutionary success and failure. They achieved something unprecedented: stable, sustainable human societies that lasted for geological ages. Their failure was simply that even the most successful adaptations have limits when the world changes faster than evolution can accommodate. Their 2 million year reign reminds us that true evolutionary wisdom lies not in finding perfect solutions, but in maintaining the flexibility to develop new solutions when old ones become obsolete. In our own era of rapid environmental and technological change, the Homo erectus paradox offers a sobering lesson about the importance of balancing stability with adaptability, tradition with innovation, and success with the humility to change when change becomes necessary. They didn't just vanish after